Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Top Secret Wine Club, the Styring Club Share Out. We've just sent out our 2021 spring collection to those of you in far-flung areas of the United States, as well as we're preparing tomorrow for our local customers to come and pick up. So we're really excited. I am going to be talking to you live, but I'm also going to be watching the chat, and I see Colin and Rebecca, and I'm super happy to have you here with me. I'm going to also be watching the participant list to make sure that I have my attendees are all able to hear me and able to see everything. So forgive me if I seem a little distracted sometimes by the technology. I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about the wines, introducing the wines, because we're really excited about this particular collection. And of course, I'll scan the chat at the same time. And if you want to put a note in the chat, just so I know you can hear me, that'd be awesome. Thank you. I see Colin on there. I see Jillian. Those are my kids. And Rebecca, who is Colin's girlfriend. So she's part of our family too. So we're super happy to have all of you here. So as you may know, it's been one full year since we closed the tasting room. Steve and I celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary on March 15th, and it was March 15th a year ago, our 34th anniversary, when we closed the doors. We had a very special event for friends. We had a very small and beautiful baby shower here, but then we closed. It was the right thing to do at the right time. We kind of hunkered down, as did everybody, for a couple months, not really knowing what was going to happen. And by Memorial Day weekend, we had kind of figured out that we could go ahead and start pouring outdoors. Now, this was something that we had never done before. We had to create a new process for doing that. We'd never taken reservations before on any kind of grand scale. And so on Saturday afternoons, we started opening for optional bring your own picnics and tastings. That was successful. We continued that through the fall. It was successful enough that along with your support, the support from our club, and the support from people ordering from around the country, we were able to keep things going. We're deeply appreciative of everything that you do to keep us going. So, you know, we're planning to do this again this summer. We're just not thinking that the science is strong enough to support us opening our tasting room this summer. We know that there are other wineries that are bigger. We know there are other wineries that have more staff, that have better ventilation, that can do it properly. But with just Steve and I on the staff right now, it's a little more than we can do. So we're going to proceed again into the summer, doing the same thing on Saturdays with optional picnic tastings outdoors as soon as the weather improves. So we're kind of thinking April-ish, maybe, certainly May. And then last year we continued right almost through Thanksgiving. We had a couple weekends that were nice enough, and we have a couple of covered spots. We are going to add 3 spots, so we'll be up to 10 tables across 2 seatings, and that's plenty for people of middle age who've never worked in food service to handle. I want to share my screen and show you some pictures because there's been some amazing stuff going on here at the winery. So I'm going to, this is a PowerPoint that I put together. I'm going to make it as full screen as possible so you can see the drive-through that we set up. So this was the first thing that we did starting in April, well, pretty much late March, early April. As soon as we had to close, we said, well, gosh, we've got club that wants to come by and pick up. How do we do that safely? So we took a bistro table from the tasting room and we put our credit card reader on it with a super long cable into the tasting room where you can see the laptop setup to accept payments. And we just put our PPE on and popped all the orders right in the trunk. So that actually worked out well. We continued that even after we started outdoor tastings because we found this was a convenient way for people to arrive and check in, get their table assignment, and then they could park and walk the grounds while we set their table. And then they could walk up to this little kiosk to check out at the end. So this worked out actually quite well for us, and we'll continue that next year. The next thing I wanted to show you was how those picnics actually look. So we just designed this carafe system where we deliver to your table the appropriate amount of each of 5 wines measured out for the size of your group, along with the right glassware and a tasting card that tells you all the things that we would tell you about each wine, as well as the family. If you flip it over, it's got some detail about the farm, when we established it, and whatnot. That way we could deliver it at the table. You would then arrive at the table after we left and enjoy yourself for about 90 minutes. And then after you left, we asked that you please leave everything, including all the picnic leavings, anything that you didn't want to take with you. And we would bust the whole table in our PPE and sterilize it. And then there would be about a half an hour before another guest would use it. So it would have a little time to settle as well. So this actually worked out very well. And we plan to continue that this summer. The next thing that we did was we decided that we would offer our holiday deal year round, and we have extended this deal. We're still doing this now. If you purchase 6 bottles, and this is a mix and match, we don't include Whimsy Riesling in that because the price point is too low, but you can ship it. I just can't take the $5 off. So for 6 bottles of any of our selections, $5 off per bottle, $45 flat rate shipping anywhere in the United States. And if you order a case, I'll take that same $5 off and I'll comp your shipping, which sometimes is better than your club discount if you're a case buyer, and sometimes not. So we'll run the math and make sure that you get the very best deal. So we're going to continue this through the balance of 2021. We're going to continue our holiday offers all year. So some other things that we've been doing, well, we had a little time on our hands, so we decided to do some paving. You can see the sidewalks that were formerly gravel. The little bits of gravel would stick in your shoes, and then you would trot them inside to the tasting room where you had brand new hardwood floors. And that just was terrible. I was picking up little stones all the time. We were really stressed about little stones in our shoes, and were we going to ruin the floors? So we had some people come out and pave. Just this little bit of cement is making all the difference in here now. The other thing that we've done is we've corrected our free-for-all parking. So now we have parking bumpers. I think we have 12 or so spaces because there are these 6 and then there's 6 on the other side. So we just put those in last week. So when you come back, it'll be the same, but maybe even just a little bit more civilized in terms of how we organize the parking and the entryway. Also, we celebrated 18 years on the farm, and so we're pretty excited. March 8th was the day in 2003 that we rolled in the driveway. Jillian was 3, Colin was 7, and that year we planted our vines. So these are vines in here with these milk carton sheaths on top, and what that does is that allows us to prevent deer damage while we are allowing the vines to grow. And so with that, here's what the vines look like now. This is a 2021 photo. And so you can see, I mean, we prune them every year. Of course, they'd be huge and bushy and crazy if we didn't prune and train them. But you can see how thick the stalks are. And in the ensuing time period, about a year after we planted the vines, we did put a deer fence around 17 acres of our 40-acre farm so that the fields would be completely preserved from the deer as best you can. It really didn't get solved until about 3 years later when we got our first dog, and that solved our deer problem for good. The children visited last year. This was taken early 2020 before the pandemic. So you can see the difference between 2003 when the tractor was first delivered and everybody, took turns riding on it. I would stand sometimes on the little bumper on the side and take tours around the farm, to today. And so you can see the kids have grown up with us, and it's been a happy life for our family here on the farm. We have Jojo. So this is our second chocolate lab. We lost Molly in 2018. She was a great dog. She'd been with us a long time. And then in 2020, was it 2019 actually, midway in 2019, we adopted Jojo. So you can see she's grown quite a bit in the past year. So she is a full-on dog now. Her training has been a little lax in terms of what I would call greeter training. She's so happy to see you. She's maniacal. And so we'll probably give her another year to settle in and get a little more training before we'll let people meet with Jojo. But she's a doll, and we hope to get her trained up and ready to meet you probably summer of 2022, but we'll see. We've got a few months before the summer. She may mellow out a little between now and then. And then this is just my thank you slide and my little family picture. So I'm going to stop sharing now and get to the real story. We're going to talk about the wines. I'm checking the chat real quick. Looks like I'm getting some grief from my kids for my math skills. I am not a math major. I was an art major. So yeah, you're probably right about that. So what we're going to do is talk about the 2 wines that were in the collection. And so based on what level you are in the collection, you got a variety in terms of the numbers of bottles, but everyone received a certain number of Estate 2016 Pinot Noir and Shameless Cabernet 2014, which is a beautiful new release for us. Now the Estate 16 Pinot Noir, which I'll taste first, was also in the collection in the fall. So it was part of the 3 vintage vertical, the 14, 15, 16 in the fall. It was the new release. And it is just shown so beautifully that I wanted to include it again. It has become my personal go-to in the portfolio. So imagine that you're me and you live here and you've kind of busted your ass all day and Steve's making dinner and you wander through the winery and you can pick anything you want. I can go back to library wines. I can pick from wines that I bought from my neighbors. I mean, it can be a dilemma sometimes, and it can be a choice not to drink everything in sight too. That's also something that you have to be choosy about. And so I more often than not will pick this 2016, even though I have other vintages available. It is 100% Ribbon Ridge, AVA, Styring estate fruit. It's all our own fruit. And what's interesting about it to me is how the maturity of the vines is really starting to show through. So these are vines that were 13 years old when this wine was, when these grapes were picked. And the striking difference between 16 and prior years, sorry, I have to have some of it. The striking difference is it has a little higher acidity, but yet and better integration, but yet the beauty of the fruit still shines through. So that higher acidity has a little bit lower alcohol. It's not really, actually, Steve was correcting me the other day. It's not actually higher in acidity, it just tastes that way because the alcohol's a little lower and the fruit is gonna come through a little bit brighter. So it's still in that cherry spectrum. It's more of a bright cherry or red cherry spectrum. Slightly lower alcohol. And then he said he feels like it has better integration of the barrel notes overall. So there's not there's more of a seamless transition from start to finish. And that's very pleasing in this wine. Wine Enthusiast recommends a little bit of aeration, but we don't use a classical aeration method. So, you know, you can buy fancy things to aerate your wine. I think most fine Pinot Noir benefit from a little bit of air, but by that I mean time in the glass. So, or time with the bottle open. So just let it kind of age a little bit, let it kind of settle after you open it, and you'll be more pleased. So oftentimes I'll pour just a little bit. I'll go away and I'll enjoy that. I might cook something, that's rare, I'm not much of a cook, but I might go do something else and then I'll come back and have a proper glass of it because it will have had a chance to kind of accommodate. In terms of food pairing, because this wine has those bright notes in it, we do recommend those kind of dusky foods that go well with Pinot Noir, things like, you know, duck or lamb or things that have a little bit of that kind of earthy edge to them. But in this case, because this wine does have that little bit of perceived higher acid, we recommend something on the lighter side. So it might be a quiche with mushrooms. It could be a sauteed mushroom, anything, honestly, because mushrooms go so well with these wines. I like to increase the intensity of that duskiness sometimes by pouring or drizzling some truffle oil on it. Don't pour it, it'd be too much. But if you make a quiche with mushrooms, then you drizzle the oil on the crust while it's still hot. It just will blow your mind with this wine. It's really, really tasty. Okay. So now to the new release, the 2014 Shameless Cabernet. This was also in your box. This is a beautiful, beautiful wine. I'm so excited to share it with you. And it won't surprise you, I have notes. So I'm gonna put those up here where I can look at you and talk at the same time. So 2014, let me first go back to the origins of Shameless. So we introduced a Shameless in 2008 vintage. So we would not have released that until 11 or 12. We take our time with our Cabernet. So Steve for many years wanted to make a Cabernet, and I kind of drew a line in the sand and I said, look, we are artisan wines of Oregon, so we're not going to buy Washington fruit. You're going to have to find some Oregon fruit that you like, and then we'll do it. And so it took many years, and we chafed a little bit over that because there's so much great Washington fruit available. We weren't very interested in the Southern Oregon higher fruit, kind of jammy flavored cabs. Really wanted something a little more restrained than that. And so finally he did find out in a little town called Echo, Oregon. So if you're familiar with Oregon, you go out I-84, which is the Oregon Trail backwards. You know, if Lewis and Clark rode their canoes backwards, a lot of hours, you'd end up in Eastern Oregon where it's nice and hot and dry and they can grow these grapes. There's a town called Hermiston where all the watermelons come from. Keep going, and you'll end up in this tiny little town called Echo. Now, this is the Columbia Valley AVA, but it's Columbia Valley, Oregon AVA. So there's a very famous Columbia Valley, Washington AVA, which includes Kennewick and Walla Walla. It's directly due north of the Oregon AVA across the river. So not surprisingly, the river forms a valley and we share it with Washington. And so that's where these grapes come from. This is a grower who grows similarly to we do, the ways that we do. So it's dry farmed. There's not a bit of irrigation. It's a beautiful, hot, dry location to ripen this fruit. We could never ripen a Cabernet Sauvignon on this property. So absolutely must be from another area other than ours. So this property is beautifully suited to cold weather grapes versus hot weather grapes. One thing that just came up last week before I get to the discussion on this wine specifically is a lot of people don't realize that cold weather wines come in a sloped shouldered bottle. So that includes Pinot Noir and Riesling and all the things that we grow here are in these sloped shouldered bottles. If you have a standing shoulder, I think of this like a woman's suit in the 80s has a nice standing shoulder, then this is a warm weather grape. And so just knowing that, you can tell that this 2014 Shameless is very different. So at one point, Steve came running up from the cellar after he tasted the 2008 in the barrel, and he said, "This is the finest wine I've ever made. I'm going to call it Zenith." And I said, "That's completely awesome, but you're going to call it Shameless because you're a shameless Pinot guy making a cab." And so we called it Shameless. We've enjoyed that name. It has a little edge of humor to it. It's a little bit of fun. And we've made this vintage several times. So the 2014, what's very interesting about it and its characteristics is that it spent 3 years in French oak in our cellar and then 3 years in the bottle before release to you. So it is robust enough now. I'm completely enjoying how smooth it is. In fact, I enjoyed a little before we started tonight. It has this incredibly full, lush flavor, but balanced tannins on the back end and a nice little acidity so that it has a clean-ish kind of finish to it. So it's very much a Northern Oregon, Southern Washington experience, more so than a Northern California, Southern Oregon experience. In my opinion, it's a real showstopper. Every time I open one and I taste it, I definitely pause for just a second. And I say, oh my gosh, that is so lush and rich and complex without being overly fruity and without, and definitely being balanced in terms of the acid and the tannins. And so Steve said, and I have a little quote from him since he's not here, he won't go on camera with me, but he said, "It's a true pleasure to drink, a really beautiful expression of the Columbia Valley AVA where it is sourced." And so one of the things that Steve's really talented at that I'm not is he can walk through a field and he could taste the grapes and project forward what it's going to taste like. And he came upon this grower when he was picking up grapes at another winery and they were receiving grapes from this grower. In fact, I think it was the Petit Verdot. I'm not sure they were receiving Cab that day. But he tasted the grapes and he just knew that it was somebody that he wanted to work with. So we dearly love working with this vineyard and that's how we go. So we are providing this as a club exclusive. There are only 15 cases in the cellar after this. It was a very small vintage and fortunately our club has grown. And so the club has taken most of this wine. If you do want it, I am offering that shipping deal. So just let me know. I've sold a couple cases in the past week. So hopefully people will take the rest of them. In terms of food pairing with this particular wine, it's complex enough to enjoy with a good, hearty, smoky piece of meat. And so I could definitely imagine having this with a nice, fatty prime rib. I think would be incredible because that acid and tannins would help kind of break that down a little bit on the palate. We enjoy buffalo steaks. And when Steve prepares those, he usually uses a really thick layer of kind of blackening spices. So some Cajun spices, as well as a really thick coating of dry basil. And so when you cook those, a ribeye, something with some fat in it, because buffalo doesn't tend to be very fatty. It can also hold up to barbecue or anything. And honestly, I enjoy it with a bowl of pistachios and a good movie on Netflix. I'm not very particular, honestly. So that's everything that I had to share with you tonight. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I'll scan through those. If anybody has any last things you'd like to say or any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer them. We're looking forward to a good growing season this year. We've just pruned all of the vines, so everything looks healthy and grand. All the cover crop is coming up, so we've got some beautiful rows of clover. We've got some nice hardy grasses coming in between the rows. We're continuing to improve our systems and looking at some different ways to manage that vegetation in ways that are responsible and sustainable, and that's always been a part of who we are. So I guess I'll sign off for now, and I'll just say thank you. Thanks to, again, our visitors, our club members, people who order additional shipments. We appreciate you, and we love you, and we wish you every good health, and continue down this path with us as we continue to grow and thrive on this beautiful farm. Thank you so much, and cheers to you, and good night.